Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm just sitting down, relaxing, getting ready for my first day of training this week, having a rainstorm as my pre-workout, and I figured I'd make this video for you all, kind of sharing an exercise that you may or may not be familiar with, that you can utilize and that I have been utilizing to get around some possible injuries or tweaks and sorenesses that may end up being injuries in the future in the gym. So, first, before I get into this exercise, and take note, I'm going to have footage of me completing this exercise next to me here, so you'll get to see it and you'll probably be wondering what in the world is he doing in that video. But before we talk about it, we have to understand the names and portions of any given exercise. So for this example, I'm going to utilize the bench press because for me, it's been my bicep lately that has been bothering me through the bench press movement, which is kind of interesting because if you're familiar with biomechanics, basic biomechanics of the bench press, the bicep is not a prime mover. It is simply a stabilizing muscle. But in this case, every exercise has two main portions of the movement. It has what's called the eccentric portion of the movement. So that would be where the muscles are stretching. So in the bench press, the eccentric would be where you are going down. You're stretching out this pec muscle. You're stretching out your triceps as your arm is going down, that's getting stretched. And then there is the concentric portion of the movement when you are actually applying the force and contracting. That's where the con in concentric comes from. It's contracting the muscles. So they are shortening, the pecs are shortening, the tricep is shortening as you are straightening your arm. And that's how you complete any given exercise. If you think about it, a bicep curl has the eccentric and the concentric that goes with it. So, with a given injury, usually you are going to feel that injury in one of those two motions or both. For me specifically with this bench press kind of tweak in my bicep, I wouldn't call it an injury yet, but it's something that's certainly bothering me. It is the eccentric portion of the movement where my bicep is being stretched along. It is the long head of my bicep at the top. It is being stretched during the eccentric portion of the bench press. It doesn't bother me nearly as much on the concentric end, but in this type of injury, or tweak rather, I would want to prevent myself from going through those motions to hopefully prevent further injury. Because right now I'm about 8-ish weeks out from nationals, and if I get a major bicep injury, that could be catastrophic to my odds competing. Alright, so now that you understand both of those directions on a given movement, and you have to understand, okay, going through those movements are usually what's going to compromise the muscle. And especially if it's an overuse injury, right? Because it's those repetitions that might be bothering it. Well, you can add a third type of motion or exercise to try and get as much out of the muscle groups while still not incurring any other damage to that muscle. And that's known as the isometric bench press, which is something you have seen me doing, hopefully to my left here in the video. The whole idea of an isometric movement is instead of having an eccentric and a concentric and doing multiple reps of that, in an isometric movement, you are flexing the muscles, applying as much force as you can without any motion. Hence the word iso meaning still. So for me, whenever I'm doing this bench press, I am, and you probably see me with the bar, or sometimes I'll do it with 135 on there, I'm pushing as hard as I can. And it's a grueling exercise. And I'll do it for 30, maybe 40 seconds at a time. I'm pushing as hard as I can on the bench, around my sticking point. But at the same time, I'm not allowing myself to move that bar. Of course, if I let myself push the bar as fast as I could move that really fast. But then I would have to repeat that eccentric movement, which is what is bothering my bicep. So by doing this isometric, where the barbell is not moving, I'm still applying force, I'm exercising all of that musculature, or at least getting it to engage, which is kind of one half of the strength building process. That's through the central nervous system, where you're getting your brain and your neurons to fire the muscle groups, right? That's why this can be effective without having to do all of these reps and possibly make that musculature more sore or continue to bother it on that path. So with this exercise, there's a few ways you can set it up. I learned this from a book that I read early on in my training career from Josh Bryant. I would suggest you go out and check out his book. Obviously not sponsored or anything like that, but he implemented this with high-level bench pressers, and it's been a tool in my toolkit over the years that I've implemented whenever I specifically have some sort of injury, because I find that the isometric bench press allows me to hang on to some of those gains. And what that'll do is I may only need it for a few sessions, but I'm still getting some work, right? I'm in the bench press position. I'm still flexing those muscles as hard as I can for a given amount of time, maybe 30 seconds, which 30 seconds of complete tension might be even longer than a regular set of bench press. So I'm still getting work in on that side with my central nervous system, but I'm also not putting that muscle through the range of motion that is hurting it. And that's what makes this so valuable for working around any sort of injury and trying to hang on to every last piece of strength gains that you can. So as far as setup tips for you, as you saw, I do this with the barbell sometimes. I also can do this if you add weight. It lessens the amount that you have to resist yourself. Obviously, it's easier to make more weight not move than less weight, right? If you have just the bar, you probably saw me, it'll creep up on you because you're not resisting yourself well enough, and it'll slowly just move through the rep. Whereas if you add weight like 135, then it's a little bit easier to stay in the same place and still flex as hard as you can. So you can set it up that way. The other way is if you set it up in a power rack and you actually put the safety bars above the barbell and you push against them. So it's an immovable object. You literally cannot bench press the power rack, and it keeps you in that same motion, right? And in that sense, you actually don't have to resist on the way down to keep yourself still. You've got the rack to do that, and you can push as hard as you can. I've never been a huge fan of that, just longer setup for one. And two, I really just prefer that total body flexion, including the antagonist muscles. And that's how I incorporate the isometric bench press into my training if I have some sort of tweak. It's not a master end-all be-all exercise by any means, but it's a tool in the tool belt in case of injury and still having to train my way through an injury. So hopefully that helps you all. Take that into your own training, give it a try if you have any sort of aches and pains to let those injuries rest. I appreciate you all watching as always. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. And until next time, happy lifting.